Welcome to the Everybody Matters podcast, a show dedicated to the idea that when organizations care enough to show their people that who they are and what they do matter, they unlock the only business idea with truly unlimited potential. I'm Brent Stewart, your host. This podcast is an outreach of Barry-Wehmiller. Don't forget to connect with us on the web at barry-wehmiller.com, on Twitter at Barry-Wehmiller, on Facebook and LinkedIn, and check out our blog, trulyhumanleadership.com. When it comes to products to organize your home or office or maybe your life, you've probably been or at least heard about the Container Store. Quite a few people have. A couple of years ago, they sold almost $800 million in merchandise. The company has come a long way since their founding in 1978, when their CEO, Kip Tindell, was asked by his father how he was going to make a living selling empty boxes. What sets the Container Store apart from many other companies, however, is their passion for people and making sure every stakeholder throughout their business is impacted positively. In 1988, Kip and the Container Store formalized their People First beliefs in a set of foundation principles, which you can find on the Container Store's blog at standfor.containerstore.com. There are quite a few similarities between the Container Store's beliefs and what we believe here at Barry-Wehmiller. In fact, our CEOs have traded guest posts on each other's blogs, and our companies continually find mutual inspiration from each other. Kip Tindell is one of the most genuine and humble business leaders you'll meet. He and Barry-Wehmiller CEO Bob Chapman have known each other for a number of years now, and we're honored that Bob's book Everybody Matters is one of a select group of books the Container Store carries on its shelves. Recently, Kip shared his thoughts on leadership with me and Barry-Wehmiller global messaging leader Mary Rudder. And it begins with Kip talking about one of the things he learned from Bob Chapman.
I used to be embarrassed when I got an employee's spouse saying, Kip, I want to tell you that, my wife Susie's been with the Container Store for 20 years, and your foundation principles and your business philosophy has not only made her completely happy and fulfilled and more self-confident, but all those things have combined to make her a better mom and a better wife, and just a much more fulfilling life for her and the people around her. And I would go, oh my God, don't say that. That's so embarrassing. I wouldn't say that, but I would think that. It was just. That's pretty hard to take, right? But now through conversations with Bob, I understand that that's kind of the point. One company at a time. We can raise the employees of that company to where each individual employee kind of rises on Maslow's hierarchy of need. And you can't be much good to the people around you if you're cold or hungry or lonely. But as you rise on that hierarchy of need, you get to where you can be not only a better leader, but just a better human being. And you're nicer to the golden retriever and the family. You're nicer to the guy at the 7-Eleven on the way home at night. And so that's a perfect summation of why more and more companies adopting this. And John Mackey and I have always worked so hard to try to spread certainly in Raj as well, the word of conscious capitalism. So now that's one of the main themes that we talk about. And it was Bob that made me kind of celebrate that rather than go, oh gosh, oh golly, So it's interesting, isn't it?
Well, yeah. That's sort of what drives us here. We truly believe a better job can build a better world.
There was a time in which we did not really talk about these business philosophies, the conscious capitalism thing, all of that to the world at large. We talked about it to our employees, we talked about it to the industry, but we kind of were reluctant to shout it from the rooftops to the customer base and all that. This was like 15 years ago, because, you don't want to help a little old lady across the street and then sort of shout it from the rooftops. Mm-hmm. But then I went to actually the very first conscious capitalism retreat at this place in Lake Travis outside of Austin, and one of the original 3 Blue Men, or maybe there was 4 of them, the Blue Men entertainers, listened to Sally Jewell and I. She was CEO of REI at the time, and we really hit it off. So we gave this talk about that, and the Blue Men stood up and said, Kip, this one guy, he said, I'm your best customer in New York. I had no idea that your company or you had those business philosophies, had those passions. I'm already your best customer in New York. Now I'll be an even better customer. Why are you keeping it a secret? And the answer was kind of just out of low-key humility or something. I didn't say that. But I did go home and say, we're not going to keep this a secret anymore. I mean, people are more and more beginning to vote with their pocketbooks, so we're going to in the right way, and that led to our blog of what we stand for, et cetera, and us really becoming a whole lot more public about that.
Well, it's interesting that you say that, because Bob has met with other business leaders who want to talk to him about the principles that we've instituted in our company and how we've instituted those things in our company. And there does seem to be a discomfort from some people who don't want to be open in their company about wanting to make these changes. And so they look to other companies for support to kind of be able to come out and say, hey, look, these guys are doing it and they're very successful. And if we did that, it's number one, it's the right thing to do, and it's not going to hurt our business. And I think people are looking for other kind of benchmark is kind of the buzzword where you can say, but look at other examples where you can do these things and it be that you're doing the right thing and you're also not harming your business at the same time. And those examples are always good to see.
Yeah, well, now we shout it from the rooftops. Now it's totally different. I've written a book. I mean, we've, we have many people a day, like I'm sure you do, contact us and say, Kip, gosh, I've got this new dry cleaning business in Atlanta. I just want you to know the whole thing is styled after your foundation principles. So we're just completely out there talking about it now, and vendors love it. All the stakeholders love it. Of course, employees love it, and I think it does make the universe conspire to assist you. You're the first 25% of, as you guys know better than anybody, the first 25% of any employee's productivity is mandatory. They have to do that or they get fired. But the next 75% of any employee in any company's productivity is voluntary, and they give that only when they feel good about their company, its product, its culture, their boss, et cetera. So you get that from the employees. You get the enthusiastic, loyal support from the customers. Most of our vendors will tell you that the Container Store is our favorite customer. A lot of them quit selling other people and just sell us. We deal with a lot of small vendors, and so the universe kind of conspires to assist you when you behave this way. So we've long, hopefully we're still modest and humble, and frankly, since we've become a public company, there's lots to keep our humility up. But we do constantly talk about this now. I mean, I'll be talking about it with Colin Powell this weekend in front of 10,000 retailers at the National Retail Federation thing, and it'll be the same thing, just conscious capitalism, the same types of stuff that we're going to talk about now. So anyway. Yeah.
Well, that's a good segue. A lot of people listening to this may not have read your book. At what point would you say that your leadership journey began in your life?
Well, I think it really began in 1978 with that first tiny little 1,600 square foot store in Dallas, Texas, and Garrett Boone and I and my wife, who joined us about a year later. We still punish her for missing that first year. She was a landscape architect, and we said, "Come," and that. Starting a business with $35,000, and the neat thing is that you get to create a company's culture kind of after your own life philosophy. And if you start or help start something like that, and we were very passionate about what are now the conscious capitalist foundation principles, Container Store's business philosophies, and I felt like that there shouldn't be one code of conduct that you conduct your personal life with, and somehow a looser code of conduct that was acceptable for your business life. They have to be one and the same. I mean, it's not like they need to be the same genuine view of life and philosophies for both business and for personal. And then we were able to actually teach that and get a kind of a harmonized culture by one-on-one contact with employees for maybe the first up to 10 years. I mean, if you're having trouble with an employee, you could simply go have Mexican food with them and straighten everything out in that one meal. But 10 years into it, and a lot of conscious capitalist businesses have this kind of history.
So these your foundation principles, they kind of existed all along, and then at some point, because you guys got so big, you basically needed to kind of codify it then.
Yeah, and we pretty well go over them with a new store staff every time we open a new store. I mean, we're opening 10 stores this year, and that happens at every one. And then it's a matter of reinforcing it. The interesting thing about these principles is that nobody ever disagrees with them. I mean, when's the last time you met somebody that's like, I don't know about that golden rule, that do unto others thing. I don't know if that's a good idea or not. I mean, everybody agrees with them. You just need to understand how important they are to guiding our business actions. And it's not important that I say they guide our business actions. It's important that you can go into any store in the country and the person that waits on you will know all about the foundation principles and enthusiastically agree that, yes, they really do guide how and what we do. We basically set our employees free to choose their own means to the end, but we do agree on the ends, or otherwise we would be, 6,000 yahoos going in 6,000 different directions. Yeah, it's codified, but it's also really constantly reinforced. Employees that have been around for a while take great pride in reinforcing it with newer employees. And interestingly enough, it is about the greatest empowerment you can do for a company, for a group of people, because it allows me to be me, it allows you to be you, but we do have a certain set of foundation principles that we ultimately agree on, which causes us to sort of pull in the same direction. And what I'm never-endingly surprised at is that when a circumstance arises in the Miami store, it's handled in very, very nearly exactly the same way as it would be handled in the Seattle store, the same circumstance. So we really are a unit. We really are a company. We really are a team with like-minded values and ideas and objectives and goals.
But that's the big challenge, is how to grow it on scale. I mean, you seem to have been able to find a way to do that, and what has been central to that success?
Well, I think it's selecting leaders. I mean, there was a point in time in which I hired every single employee that came to work for us, but of course that became impossible. So let's make sure that the people that do the hiring are looking for the same things. And first and foremost is a certain a cultural. Let's hire people that are going to really fit into the culture. If they don't, they kind of look at us like we're crazy and run off pretty soon anyway. But it's painful and unnecessary to go through that. And so we talk a lot about how can we recognize that in the candidates that we hire. I mean, we'll put you through like 8 interviews. We'll wear you out. I mean, we think the most important thing we do is who we hire. And even the way that we pay and the way that we give raises, the president of our company, Melissa Rife, still first thing in the morning looks at every single pay increase company-wide. It's astounding to me she can keep up with it. And just looks at it and talks with the store general manager or vice president or whatever, so that we're dividing the pie in the same way according to contribution, and there's not any differences between, you're kind of lucky if you work for this vice president because she pays really well, and you're sort of unlucky if you work for this vice president because she's kind of a tightwad. No, it really is consistent. Our goal is to pay according to contribution, and I hope the 330th biggest contributor to the company, 330th most money, and I hope if all of our compensation was posted in the newspaper one day, the vast majority of people would say, oh yeah, that's where I ought to be, right above that person and right below that person. Very idealistic, but you'd be surprised how close you can come to that, not just with compensation, but with all matters, if you just insist upon perfection with it and just work it to death and care more about it than anybody else, and perhaps importantly, communicate about it more than anybody else. One of our foundation principles is that communication is leadership. Leadership and communication are the same thing, and we really believe that. So we communicate up, down, sideways, all around. There's no top-down militaristic type structure. Anybody can talk to anybody anytime, and it's a little crazy how much we communicate, but I think whatever success we've been able to achieve has been in large part because of that foundation principle.
Mm. I read that you guys spend a lot of time training your people when you hire them. Is communication a part of that training, better communication?
Well, we have 283 hours of formal training for each first-year employee. 283. The industry average, I'm ashamed to say, is 8. Mm-hmm. 8 hours of formal training in the industry. And I'm thrilled and lucky enough to be the chairman of the National Retail Federation. And one of the big things I'm trying to do with the National Retail Federation is to convince retailers that it is worth the investment to train their retail employees more. I mean, they don't have to go to 283. 283 is more than 8, but 8's not enough. And there's nothing worse than working on a retail sales floor and not knowing anything about the products you're selling or mm-hmm. or whatever. So, and then there's a lot more, quote, training that happens besides that formal training, where you have the mentorship and the prideful teamwork that comes from people who've been around a long time, really spending a lot of their time working with the newer people. Fortunately, we don't have any, we don't have much turnover in an industry where the industry average is over 100% per year, which means the average retail employee in America doesn't even last a year. Ours is around 10%, which is very, very low for this industry. You can't afford to spend time communicating and training and developing people unless, if you got to lose them. But of course, if you don't do those things, you will lose them.
Right, so it's a chicken or the egg kind of thing somewhere.
It really, really is. So we're an employee-first culture. We believe that if you take better care of the employee than anybody else, if you really and truly take better care of the employee than anybody else, she really and truly will take better care of the customer than anybody else. And if those two people are really ecstatic, well then all the other stakeholders and the shareholder, everybody else is going to be very happy. So we don't even put the customer first. We put the employee first. And by doing that, I think you wind up with a happier, better served customer than any other methodology.
And that goes back, to what we were talking about earlier. People go home at the end of the day more fulfilled. They treat their spouse better. They treat their child better because they've had a good day where they've felt fulfilled. And there again, that's that link to creating the better world.
Well, we probably place too much of our self-worth in what we do for a living. It's probably overrated in this country, even worse in Japan. Maybe we need to spend more time in France or something. But, a lot of how we feel about ourselves has to do with how well we assess our work situation, probably more than it should. So, yeah, if you can be fulfilled rather than beaten down at work, if you can be you can achieve success by being yourself rather than being robotically following somebody else's idea of excellence. These I'm preaching to the preacher. All these are things that Barry-Wehmiller, is really doing such a great job helping the other of us that feel this way talk about to America and the world. And I remember 9 or 10 years ago when we first started talking about conscious capitalism, the skepticism was huge. it was everywhere. It was, people would kind of roll their eyes and think kumbaya when they heard you speak about it. Now the skepticism has vanished. And, we do have evidence that by and large the companies that behave this way outperform the S&P index hugely. There's always exceptions. There's always up and downs. But in general, people are becoming convinced that as the world changes and as business changes, the companies that behave more and more this way are beginning to be the ones to dominate their niche, and the ones that are still trying to follow some top-down militaristic style of hierarchy and whatnot are beginning to lose market share and not do that. And that's good for the GDP. It's good for those companies. It's good for the employees. It truly is wonderful for the world. It's great for the customers. It's great for all the stakeholders. So I remember that Raj Sisodia and I gave a speech to all of the best business school, the deans of all the MBA programs, and not just the United States, but everywhere. And everybody was there. And I think it's really important for conscious capitalism and these types of thoughts to be taught at the business schools. Ultimately, we have to have kids coming out with their MBAs thinking that business is not a zero-sum game. Business is not a zero-sum game. So conscious capitalism being taught at those institutions, particularly the Whartons and the Harvards and the Stanfords, where it is taught now. And if those guys are teaching it, well then, we just did another documentary with MIT and Harvard just like 2 weeks ago on this. When those people are teaching it, well then all the other schools will begin to as well. But my point is there was no skepticism whatsoever from these business school deans about how well these business philosophies work in terms of financial performance, et cetera, success, so to speak. The people that are still skeptical about this are usually people who are sort of new to the workplace, who are young. I gave a speech right after that business dean thing to a group of high school senior boys at St. Mark's, which is probably the most competitive private school in Texas. Brilliant kids, but all they cared about was, grades and their, oh boy, and they were quite skeptical, boys. And I said, you guys are too skeptical. The business deans at the schools you're getting ready to attend aren't skeptical at all. And so, interesting. A lot of progress has been made, thanks to you guys and people like Whole Foods and all, and who are out there talking about these matters.
Yeah. One thing we kind of touched on a little bit earlier, kind of want to go back to that, is the concept of stakeholders. I think we have similar views on what we feel like a stakeholder is, but Kip, talk a little bit about who you consider to be stakeholders with your organization.
Milton Friedman famously said that the only reason a corporation exists is to maximize the return of the shareholder. And conscious capitalists are like, hey, really and truly, Milton, with all due respect, I know you won a Nobel Prize and everything, but actually what a better way might be to take better care of the employee than anybody else, and then she will be so fulfilled and productive that she will take better care of the customer. Those two people are ecstatic. Well, then wonderfully and almost ironically enough, your shareholder is going to be ecstatic as well. And so, you've got customers, you've got vendors. I mean, at the Container Store, we really celebrate the vendor. We have these loyal vendors. The way we can compete is by having exclusives on products from great vendors that they don't sell to the mass merchants. They sell to us. So we're not selling the same thing everybody else is. And so employees and vendors and the communities, it's so important to have the support and celebration by the community of the business there. And of course, ultimately the shareholder as well. And you cannot take great care of the community. You can't treat the vendors fairly, and you can't take great care of the employees unless the shareholder is doing quite well too. But it's very much a profit oriented motive. It's not sacrifice. That's the difference between say conscious capitalism is just a socially conscious company. Some people approach it, I'm going to have this business, and I'm going to do business as usual, and then in the end I'm going to give 5% of my revenue or earnings to these causes. No, we're saying that because you take better care of the environment, because you take care of the community, because you take better care of your vendors, because you take care of your employees, they all conspire to assist you, and you actually make more money than if you didn't. That's the belief of conscious capitalism, as opposed to just being a great corporate citizen.
You wrote a guest blog post for us a few weeks ago, and you talked about how your favorite movie is It's a Wonderful Life, and that as a really good illustrator of what the concept of Wake is. Tell us about Wake and how Container Store views that.
Well, Wake is a little bit synonymous with the kind of the optimization of all the stakeholders and the stakeholder model of conscious capitalism, but I really like the concept of Wake. W-A-K-E, like a boat's wake. I mean, everything you do and everything you don't do impacts the people around you and your business, and frankly, the world around you, far, far more than you think it does. Even the most arrogant person you know actually underestimates the power of his wake. It's Wonderful Life is, I guess, a corny movie, but it's my favorite because the whole movie is pointing out to one guy the power of his wake. And everything you do and everything, you go out at night, you look at the stars, and the Rocky Mountains or somewhere where you can see the stars, and you just feel so small and insignificant. But actually, the impact that we have on the people around us is vastly, vastly greater than we think. I love the concept of trying to build a business where everybody thrives. I mean, you're building a business in a manner that causes everybody associated with the business to thrive, the vendors, the employees, the customers, of course, the shareholders, everybody. And, pursuant to that is just being aware of the power of your wake, and an individual that behaves with that recognition is a better human being. I mean, they're a lot better to be around. They do a lot more good for the people around them in the business. A company that does that is more rare, where everyone associated with the business understands the power of their wake, and so they're not just kind of blazing through. Have you ever seen an unnaturally bad driver that's just kind of unaware of the near accidents that he's causing as he's weaving in and out of the freeway at twice the speed limit or something? I mean, it's just, they're just oblivious to it. And of course there are people and there are companies like that. And so I love the power of the wake. I think it helps explain how we try to behave as individuals and companies. It is not altruism. It's a competitive advantage. Your employees love it, your vendors love it, your shareholders love it, your communities love it, and then all those people conspire to assist you. It's a lot easier to succeed in business when everybody wants to see you win than when everybody's laying awake at night trying to figure out how to get back to you.
If you'd like to know more about the Container Store, or Kip Tindell, or Kip's book, Uncontainable, How Passion, Commitment, and Conscious Capitalism Built a Business Where Everyone Thrives, and to receive inspiration from a conscious business, check out the Container Store's blog at standfor.containerstore.com. If you'd like to find out more about Bob Chapman and Ross Zodia's book, Everybody Matters, The Extraordinary Power of Caring for Your People Like Family, go to everybodymattersbook.com. And for updates on the book, this podcast, and to get a lot of great content and insight, don't forget to connect with us on the web at Barry-Wehmiller.com, on Twitter at Barry-Wehmiller, on Facebook and LinkedIn, and check out our blog, trulyhumanleadership.com. I'm Brent Stewart, thanks for listening, and don't forget, Everybody Matters is the only business idea with truly unlimited potential.